thought he was choosing work over me. Like a majority of my life. I was like, Dad just works all the time. He doesn't like really give two what's about, or his relationship with me. My dad missed basketball games. He missed baseball games. He missed trips. He was late from school. He was late picking me up from school a lot. He always made time to like take me to like sports games in the Bay Area. I was very fortunate. I got to go to San Francisco Giants games. I went to a couple 49er games, went to Warriors games. Like this was like pre-Steph Curry. This is like when we were not very good.
So you're an original fan. All right. See,
no. I'm an original fan. Like, no. I'm an original fan. Like I remember the days of like Tim Hardaway, Chris Mullin, and Chris Webber. Yeah. Like Latrell Sprewell. For some of you remember, Ronnie Cycli used to play for the Warriors.
Right there.
Oh yeah, like I remember those days. And for me, like going to those games at the Cow Palace in like back in the day when the Warriors played there, it was one of those things where my dad always made time for me for those sporting events, but he was still connected to work. He'd still have his headphones and he'd still be on client calls. And it was very much like to me as a kid, it was very much spending time with me when he like fitting me into his schedule because he was working so much. And that to me was one of the most profound memories that I had of my dad. Was he always was able to take me to sports games, but I never really truly remembered him from when I was a kid, like being fully present or fully in that. And I don't know if that was just because like his, youthful curiosity was making him think and question about a lot of things. I don't know if it was because of his like Renaissance period of where he was going through this rebirth from being a divorced man to now finding himself and finding his new faith and relationship with life. My dad became a reborn Christian, I remember, from a very young age. And that was a very powerful experience to watch as a young kid. But I remember my dad was just always very curious about the world and always very curious about, the mechanics of things, how things worked.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. It's, man, just thinking about like the tough split because I couldn't even really, my mom had several jobs afterwards. We actually, my parents split when I lived in Bermuda because my dad was a Marine as well. And I remember my mom just staying there for several years. And looking back, it's probably not cheap to move from Bermuda to go to California because that's where we were all at. We were in California. Okay. My dad was stationed in Camp Pendleton after that. And then I remember hearing the news that my mom was, finally moving to California. So that was great, because I hadn't seen her for a few years. And then, her coming to California, obviously it makes it a lot easier instead of taking I don't even know how much money it would cost for a plane ticket. I don't know. But yeah, that whole dynamic, she held on to a few different jobs afterwards. But my dad, obviously, he was still a Marine. He ended up retiring. He, became like a mailman. Some other things that it's just, I felt like he didn't need to do it, but it was just more so because he felt the need to stay busy while in retirement. I think it kind of gives you like a sense of belonging, a sense of like, I need to do something type thing instead of just like, retiring and then just chilling out. But yeah, I'm glad that ended up happening. It was hard having the separation to where you can only see one and not the other. So I truly do believe, in humanity that women balance men out, men balance women out. Yeah. And I think it's very important to have both in this. Yes, I understand there's other dynamics, women, men. That's not what I'm talking about on this one. But, there's having the hard side all the time with your dad. It's more of a long-term investment. You don't really get short-term gratification by having a strict parent all the time. It's more of what ends up helping you long-term for discipline-wise. Having a mom, which typically the moms are a little bit more nicer. If somebody else's parents is different, you could tell us. But my mom was a little bit more of the nicer one. So having that is a short-term, gratification. It makes you feel better. You don't always feel like you're messing something up. It's not as stressful, Mom's gonna always, get your back on those little things where dad's being extra strict. So that's why it's good to have that balance. and not having that, I definitely do think that affects kids a lot.
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the things that's come up in the recent years is, when you were talking about man and woman, the masculine and feminine energies that we all possess, where, there's a softer side to all of us. And then there's more of the direct aggressive side to us, protector side of us in the form of the masculine energy. And man, woman, it does not matter. We have these energies all within us. If you subscribe to that, right? I know I do. And I find at times that for us, that when we're too much either in one energy or we're in another energy, it does throw us off. It creates, there's a lack of equilibrium within that. And so for me, when I was a kid, and you were talking about that as well. When I was a kid, like both of my parents shifted very much in the masculine. They were very much like, mom had to be, because she was a fighter, right? Like she was diagnosed with cancer, with leukemia when I was 16 years old. So there was no choice really for her to be in the softer side, except when, I remember this distinctly, is that she told me that, when she was getting treatment, and at the time, when I was 16 years old, AML, which is acute myeloid leukemia, that was seen as a death sentence, less than 50% chance of survival. Bone marrow transplants were like not a thing then. Now I think it's most cancers. There's some cancers where if you catch it early enough, it's like 90%, 85%. It's like a crazy high survival rate.
Right.
So for her, I remember that she told me that one of the few times I saw her really be in the receiving, which is very much more the feminine, which was making the choice and accepting and receiving the opportunity to live a second life, to come out of cancer and to be able to live life. And my mom beat cancer. She's been good for 30 years, or not 30 years, probably less than 25 years. I think my math serves me right. Probably not.
Let's take time to, because my mom the same thing. My dad, got to give praise to that.
Yeah, it really is. It's a true blessing. I'm glad to hear that on your end, man. It's really a true blessing. And when to go and using that as an example to go back to the masculine, feminine energies, a lot of us have to be able to create this level of balance in our lives. We often, at times, we strive to be in like the aggressive state, right? The masculine, the direct, the strength, the grounding, or the women, which is more the flowy, the creative, the light, the nurturing. And I think a lot of us, learn from our parents to be dominant in one of those two energies. And then we spend a lot of our times in our lives trying to figure out how to balance them, right? Like when we're too much in this, in the masculine, when we're too much in the feminine. I share this with all of you because for me, I learned a lot about what energy I was in, more so depending upon which parent was my favorite. Because for me, there were periods in high school where it's like, hey, I have problems with mom. Like mom is she's like on my 24/7, and like I'm tired of this. And so I'm going to go dip out to dad's house because he's a little bit more chill and he's cool. But then you get to dad. And so I wanted to start acting more like my dad. And then I'd be in the energy of my dad where it's like, my dad kind of always worked, but he always made time. He was a hobbies guy. He still is. Always has time for his hobbies. But my dad was very regimented in terms of how you lived your life. It was very much like, do this, but don't do this. It's very military. So then I rejected that. And then I was like, I'm going to go back to mom's house because like I could sneak out of my mom's house and like go hang out with my friends late at night on a school night, and didn't like, she would never know because you couldn't wake her up with a bomb going outside her house. Like she was like those deep sleepers. So like I knew that I could sneak out of the house then, but then at that point, mom would start catching me. And so I went through this like shift of like, whatever parent was favorable in my eyes was the one I tried to adopt. And I think a lot of us who have children, a lot of us remember as kids, is that we end up like getting into our older age and our teenage years trying to either be like one parent or the other, depending upon who's in favor with us. So it's really interesting. Really interesting.
No, it's so crazy. Like everything you're saying, like literally it almost applies to me. Like every which way, or like mantra of like how you speak about these different dynamics, it literally like I picture me. Like, you know, it's